So let us carry on as it goes. And so we are looking at the Anapanasati Sutta, and it's going slowly, which is kind of nice. I like to go slowly. And so we're just going to continue. We finished off this morning about the Kaya Nupassana part of Anapanasati, which is the first 4 steps, and now we're going to go on to the next 4, which is steps 5 to 8, which are equivalent to the Vedana Nupassana in the Satipatthana Sutta. So, as always, I'll just start off by reading what is going on. This is a continuation of what we're doing before, so we're kind of gradually deepening the practice here. So you probably know this already, because it's quite a common part of the Dhamma, basically. So it goes on. They practice like this: I will breathe in, experiencing rapture. They practice like this: I will breathe out, experiencing rapture. They practice like this: I will breathe in, experiencing bliss. They practice like this: I'll breathe out, experiencing bliss. They practice like this: I will breathe in, experiencing mental processes. They practice like this: I will breathe out, experiencing mental processes. They practice like this: I will breathe in, stilling the mental processes. They practice like this: I will breathe out, stilling the mental processes. So here again you can see some of the continuation of what we're talking about before. Very prominent themes here are the ideas of happiness of various kinds and stilling, the calming down of things. And this is really the way that the Buddha kind of explains meditation almost throughout the sutta, as the emphasis is on these 2 qualities specifically: the calming down, the stilling on the one hand, and on the other hand, the profundity of the bliss or the joy or the happiness that you experience. This is like how meditation is working, basically. And that's kind of in its own right very interesting. The degree of peace that you have, the degree of stillness that you experience, and the profundity of the happiness or joy that you have. So really, really important points to keep in mind. So there's nothing dry about this. It's kind of full of joy and happiness and all these kind of things. The mind is not discursive. You're not trying to use the movement of the mind to understand anything at this point. You're trying to still things down. So both of these qualities are very interesting, what it says about the Buddha's system of meditation. And it's not just here. We shall see when we come to the next sutta, which is like what you might call the dependent liberation sequence of meditation. It's a very, very common sequence that you find in the suttas. We'll see it shortly, hopefully. And it has the same kind of sequence, similar kind of thing. You can map these things next to each other and show that they are basically the same. So the focus is on bliss, the focus is on stillness, the 2 elements again and again. And that dependent liberation sequence is also one of these, because it is very common, it is one of these fundamental ideas of Buddhism. It really is, in a way, an expansion on the 7 factors of awakening, which in turn are part of the 37 factors, or the 37 Bodhipakya Dhammas, the 37 aids to awakening here. So all of these things revolve around each other. The 7 factors of awakening, again, also have a similar kind of structure. So all of these things relating to the similar ideas, core Dhamma concepts, every one of them. And it's kind of nice to put this in tabular form, when you can see the similarities between all of these different ways of presenting, if you like, the process of meditation. So, it starts off with experiencing rapture. So this is piti. Rapture is a kind of strong kind of joy. It can be like a simple joy that you often have in the beginning. Is like often called pamujja in the suttas, and it's a kind of the gladness that you have in the mind. You're feeling light and easy, glad about being glad about whatever you're going well on the path, or something nice happened in your life. It can be more like material gladness, or it can be more spiritual gladness of various kinds, depending on what the cause is. And then as that gladness becomes more profound, as you start to deepen it through the meditation, especially the breath meditation, it becomes very powerful, and it has a physical sensation to it very often, like maybe waves of bliss kind of going through the body. It's both mental and physical at the same time. It's hard to distinguish. I mean, in the end, all experience is mental in the end, but it has a different focus or locus, or whatever you want to call it, where you experience it, which sense base is the prominent one. And so it often feels kind of physical. This is described not so much in the suttas. The suttas just use the word piti, just use this idea. Rapture is often a translation that is used, and I think that is probably a good translation. But it is explained in the Visuddhimagga as kind of, if you can feel it in different ways going through the body, different kind of experiences of bliss. But essentially, it's like a movement of bliss, often physically felt. That's what it is. It can move in different ways, showering bliss or whatever the terminology used in the Visuddhimagga. You don't really need to get so much into that. It's more about the sense of movement. So now it's getting really pleasant. You can see why this is starting to feel really joyful at this particular point. So one of the questions here is, how do we move from the Kaya-nupassana, the body contemplation, to the Vedana-nupassana, the contemplation of feelings? It's often in these transitions that sometimes the mind stops, or you come to a plateau and you can't kind of make the leap from one to the next one. Some people say, you become really peaceful. I don't feel any joy. Why is that? I can't really seem to go beyond the peace. What is going on there? And this is where these contemplations we will have a look at later on. These are contemplations that specifically are designed to give rise to joy in the practice. These are the anusatis, the recollections. The Buddha Dhamma Sangha, the Sila, the Chaga, and the Devata Nusatis. 6, and there are more kind of little ones as well spread around the suttas. And these are recollections that we can do to give rise to that joy in the practice. And at a point like this, you're becoming peaceful. Sometimes all you have to do is to remind yourself that you are living a good life, or that you can remind yourself that you're living a generous lifestyle, or that you are the disciple of the Buddha, or that you have these amazing teachings at your disposal. And if you have developed that idea beforehand, you know that this is the case, then just by a very simple turning of the mind, like a nudge of the mind in that direction, can be enough to give rise to joy, happiness. Wow, it's true, I am living well. It's not like it's not a conceit. It's just the knowledge that actually is true, and that gives rise to a sense of joy when that happens. This is not an ego conceit anymore. This is just a natural understanding of the spiritual path. The same thing with generosity, etc. And so this is kind of how you can often you do the practice, and the joy just emerges out of the breath. The breath becomes more subtle, and often is a sense of joy coming with that. But sometimes you need something else to nudge the mind a little bit. So this is then how you can make that leap from one to the other one. And then you can experience this piti, this kind of physical sensation, almost mixture of mental and physical sensation of joy, happiness, and bliss. And then you keep going. You're still breathing here. Sometimes the question arises, are you aware of the breath or the feelings at this point? And the reality is a bit of both. The breath is there, but you're also experiencing the bliss. The bliss is starting, at some point the bliss becomes so strong that the bliss becomes prominent, and the breath kind of fades a bit into the background. But basically both are still present. And that's the vast majority of what you experience at this point, is those two things. This becomes the center of your attention. You can still hear things if noises happen, but they kind of become less interesting to you. Then you keep going. You make that peace, that bliss, you make it more profound. You continue watching the breath. The breath is like the anchor here of the meditation experience. So if you have any doubts about what to do, sometimes if you just go to the bliss, you may feel it may not be as as easy to follow as the breath. The breath is always there. The breath is like a regular thing. Bliss may be more fluctuating. It may not be obvious how to stay with it in the same way as the breath. So staying with the breath as the anchor is often useful because it is a very regular thing. And so the breath is like the anchor, and as you then become more and more peaceful, that bliss that you had before, it becomes more settled. It doesn't have the same movement and the same kind of physical dimension that it had before. It becomes more powerful in a profound sense, and it loses some of that physical aspect. It becomes deeper and deeper and deeper. Calm and bliss moving together in this way, the two kind of main signposts that the meditation is going in the right way. So at this point, this is very delightful. Now you know why you're meditating at this point. You know the purpose. And even though you know why you're meditating, still it is only the beginning of a journey that goes far, far deeper. And this is one of the things that is so awesome and so amazing with the path of Buddhism, is that it feels like you have found the meaning of life. And then someone who is more experienced than you tells you, actually, no, there's a much, much more to this. This is only the beginning. You're only starting to experiencing happiness and peace. Keep going, and it gets far more profound than this. And so all of these steps take you further and further along this journey of bliss and peace, deeper and deeper. And this is why this is so amazing. This is so remarkable. This is why this is the meaning of life. This is what life is all about. This is the greatest discovery, the greatest journey of adventure that anyone can be on. This is just, imagine everyone in the world desires this, even though they may not know it exists or is available. It's kind of obvious that this is what we all live for. Feeling the most profound, deep happiness and joy that is available in existence. And then ultimately kind of going beyond that even to something even more profound. So this is what makes this whole path of Buddhism so delightful. And this is also why it is so problematic that when we present Buddhism to the world, it's so important that we present this positive attribute, because this positive attribute is what people can relate to. Everyone can relate to this. Everyone wants to be happy. We all have some idea what it means to be happy and peaceful in a profound sense. So that's, when we present everything as dukkha, people get the wrong end of the stick. I mean, in a higher sense, it is true. But when you say everything is dukkha, you're kind of taking the Buddha's view of the world. And the Buddha's view of the world is something that very few people can really understand and relate to. And so they will reject Buddhism because they don't know what you're talking about. But actually, so for ordinary people, we need to present this positive side of Buddhism, because that is what people can relate to. Everyone knows what this means, at least have some inkling, some preliminary idea of what this is about. So this is Vedananupassana, incredibly attractive. One of the interesting things about this, I'm talking about piti and sukha now, the joy and the bliss. The next thing it talks about here is the experiencing the mental processes. And the mental process at this point basically is that bliss and joy. That bliss and rapture, that's basically what it is. Maybe some perception, in other words, the perception of the breath may be added to that, but essentially the mental process at this point, the citta sankhara is defined in the sutras as Vedana and Sanya, because that is the content of your mind. That's what you perceive. And so that is basically the content of your mind. That is the mental process. That is what is happening inside of you. So again, it's just emphasizing that. And then the last one is the stilling of the mental processes. And so then the calming of that perception, the further calming of the breath, the further calming of the joy and the happiness, to make it really super profound, more and more profound as you go along. And so can we wait, please, if you don't mind? Yeah, thanks. So this is a kind of a gradual movement. What is very interesting about this, which I always thought was really fascinating about this, when you go to the Satipatthana Sutta, it talks about the Vedananupassana contemplation of feeling. It talks about experiencing dukkha, sukha, and adukkha sukha, which is like the neutral feeling. And it talks about those three in terms of worldly experiences, samisa feelings, and niramisa, spiritual feelings. That's basically the Vedananupassana in the Satipatthana Sutta. But you will notice that there is nothing about dukkha here. So what happened to the dukkha? Isn't that kind of nice? There's no, according to this, according to Satipatthana Sutta, if you read that, you think, oh, I have to sit and experience pain. Yeah, so I better sit still for 2 hours and see if I can get some pain, and then I can contemplate the pain. That's what you might be your assumption by reading the Satipatthana Sutta. Yeah, it kind of seems reasonable. You have to contemplate the pain, but actually here there's nothing about pain. It's all about happiness. In other words, actually you don't need to experience pain in meditation. You fulfill these contemplations merely by experiencing happiness and joy. You complete it. So how is that possible? How can that be? And the answer is that the best way to contemplate something and to understand something is when it has ceased, when it's gone. It is the absence of something that really makes you understand what it is. Yeah? Because when it's gone, then you know what it's like to be without it. And when you know what's going to be without, then you have a complete picture of what that thing was. As long as you are immersed in it, as long as it's part of you, you haven't withdrawn fully, you don't have a full understanding of it. And so to really understand dukkha, come out of it completely. And when you come out of it completely, oh, now I understand these bodily feelings. Now I understand what the Buddha was talking about the body being a precipice, a chasm of dukkha. Yeah, there's endless dukkha. This is what the Buddha talks about the body in the suttas. It's this bottomless precipice of dukkha. And now you understand the problem of the body, because now you are withdrawing from it. And so there are many ways of understanding these feelings, or understanding anything, but the most powerful way, and we'll see that soon, is when something comes to an end, when it ceases, when it's completely gone. That is when you can understand what it is. And this, of course, is exactly the same thing as that old simile of the tadpole and the water. A tadpole cannot understand water because it's in the water. You have to emerge from the water. When you emerge, well, then you know what it was, because now you are out of the wet. Oh, that's what water was, thinks the frog. Yeah, the tadpole had no idea. Actually, the frog doesn't think anything, but that's kind of the simile is still the same. So that is kind of very nice to be aware of that. You don't actually need to experience all this dukkha. And that's good, because there's enough dukkha in life already. Is anyone who does not have enough dukkha in their life? Enough, right? I mean, I must admit, I have quite a good life, to be honest, in so many ways. Still, I have plenty enough dukkha in my own life. I don't really need any more. So if I can sit down on my meditation cushion and not experience pain, yay, I'll be very happy with that. So this is then the contemplation of feelings and how it works together with the mindfulness of breathing. How this becomes like one experience, breath and joy and happiness kind of conjoined together in this way. All right, so let's go on to the contemplation of mind, which is the next one. This is Chittanupassana. So this is equivalent to the contemplation of mind in the Satipatthana Sutta, and here it is spoken of in a slightly different way. So this is what the Buddha says. You practice like this. I'll breathe in, experiencing the mind. You practice like this. I'll breathe out, experiencing the mind. You practice like this. I will breathe in, gladdening the mind. You practice like this, I will breathe out, gladdening the mind. You practice like this, I'll breathe in, immersing the mind in samadhi, or stilling the mind. You practice like this, I will breathe out, stilling the mind. You practice like this, I will breathe in, freeing the mind. You practice like this, I will breathe out, freeing the mind. So there you are. That is the Chitta Nupassana according to the Anapanasati Sutta. And again, when you look at that, you see the same things again. You have the gladdening of the mind, and then you have the stilling of the mind. Yeah. So again, this idea of bliss and peace, bliss and stillness kind of coming together. This is kind of the, goes all the way through this. You have the same kind of two main ideas. And so we are going further down into this process of stilling and gladdening, stilling and feeling bliss, deeper and deeper and deeper here. But it starts out with experiencing the mind. So what does it mean to experience the mind? This may not be at all obvious what it means. But most of the things that I say when I talk about this, I have learned from my teacher, Ajahn Brahm. Yeah, I'm just a sheep following after Ajahn Brahm. He kind of leads me by the neck and pulls me along, and I say, yes, sir, and I go along. So most of these things I've learned from him, and he has some beautiful ways of talking about this. I have lived with Ajahn Brahm for 30 years. Yeah, I lived with Ajahn Brahm even before Bhante Sujato came to Bodhinyana Monastery. So 30 years, and so I heard Ajahn Brahm when he was in his most fiery period, and he taught like there was all fire and brimstone. That's what he called it himself in those days. And that was kind of nice. I liked that about Ajahn Brahm. These days he's really mellow, and he doesn't say anything controversial anymore. I miss those controversial days a little bit. But one of the beautiful things about someone like Ajahn Brahm, he'd been very famous for a long time now. He's been like on the Watkins list of the 100 most spiritually influential people in the world, that sort of thing. And among Buddhists, it was like the Dalai Lama and Thich Nhat Hanh and Ajahn Brahm. So it was that kind of category. And so he has been very famous, and his books have been very well known and well read, been on the bestseller list of wisdom publications for donkey's years and all these kind of things. But he is not trapped by his fame. He's not trapped by the accolades. He's not trapped by the fact that he is a Chao Kun in Thailand. Usually when you get these accolades and you get these kind of medals that you're supposed to hang around your neck, or you put up the diploma or whatever, very often that traps you. You become dependent on those things. But if you, unlike Ajahn Brahm, you use your fame to engender change, and that is the kind of beautiful thing to do. So, in 2009, when we ordained bhikkhunis in Perth, he was already very, very famous, and he knew that this was going to become difficult. I didn't know how difficult, but he knew it was going to be controversial. He didn't know how controversial, but he was willing to do that, and he did. His fame or the accolade, that was kind of irrelevant. And in a sense, not only is it not relevant, it's a positive. Because if you are famous, then the impact you're going to have of doing something right is going to be far greater. So fame, in that sense, can be a positive thing, because it means that when you do something radical, as long as it is a good thing, it has to be a good thing, of course, as long as it has more impact on the world. And that is to me, a true sense of bravery in that. You're willing to let go of all of this identity around being famous or being well known, giving up your Chao Kunship if necessary, because who cares? That's not what life is about anyway. It is about doing what is right. And that to me is a sign of a really great personality. Of course, it has to be right, it has to be good, it has to be morally important. I remember after Ajahn Brahm, he came back from Thailand. This was after he did the ordination, and then he was called to Thailand and said, we want to talk to you about this. And it was apparently a very fierce meeting. One of the lay people from Perth was there, and they said it was really a fierce kind of meeting, so it was kind of very interesting. And then Ajahn Brahm came back, and he said, well, this is it. We are now been kind of expelled by those monasteries in Thailand, and all the kind of Ajahn Brahm's friends are kind of left him. All your friends are gone. And so I said to Ajahn Brahm, well, how do you feel about all of this? And Ajahn Brahm said, well, I asked myself only one question, and that question was, have I done anything wrong? That was the only question that mattered. And when I asked myself that question, the answer came back, no, I haven't done anything wrong. And then I let it go. That's life. Yeah, this is the only question we need to ask. What is right? What is wrong? What is morally correct? What is conducive? What will help my practice and the practice of others in the future? That is the only thing that matters. And if you have that integrity, then you should do it. Regardless of how it affects the ego is irrelevant. It should have nothing to do with ego at all. That's kind of irrelevant. It should do what is right. And sometimes we forget that the Buddha, now we may feel like the Buddha is part of the establishment because in a Buddhist country, Buddhism is so established and Buddhism becomes part of the establishment. But the Buddha was in many ways a radical at his own time. He went against the Brahmanical ideas of the time. And so all the greatest people in history, those who really have made a change, they have been those who had that willingness and ability to go against the stream and against the flow and give rise to some positive change in society and around them. So anyway, so my point here in talking about all of this is that is that basically about Ajahn Brahm and the way he teaches these things and the way he taught this idea of experience the mind, what he said, and this was something he said a long time ago. He said that the way that you know that you are experiencing the mind, to know what something is, you have to take away those things that it is not. And that thing remains, then you know what it is. And what is not the mind is the five senses. Yeah, so when the five senses kind of disappear, then you know what the mind is. So what remains after non-mind is gone, that what remains is mind. And so when the five senses start to disappear, what is it that you experience? At this point, the senses are not entirely gone yet. There's still some left of them, but they're starting to really disappear quite dramatically. And what usually happens at that point is that you get these things that is usually called a nimitta these days. In the sutras, it's just called a light, or bhasa, or form. But these days they use the word nimitta. The word nimitta is used a bit differently in the sutras. It means more like a meditation object, or a basis or foundation for meditation, or something like that. And so you get these lights in the mind, yeah? Lights kind of turning on. And that light also has a form, usually. That's why it's called rupa and obhasa. Obhasa is the light, the rupa is the form. And the usual way that most people will experience these things is like a disc or a circle with light. And that is kind of the mind starting to appear. Now you are kind of moving away from the five-sense world into the mental realm. The senses are still there, they're still accessible to you, but now they're largely kind of disappearing. And so this is what experience in the mind, I think it means here. And I'm following basically Ajahn Brahm. The way the commentaries explain this is a bit different. I'm not following the commentaries here. The commentaries, they say that already with the Vedananupassana, they talk about the first and the second jhana already at that point, and they're kind of mixing up the jhanas in various ways. But and that may be one interpretation. But I think this interpretation is more likely to be true, because almost all suttas are gradual. They gradually move on. And then the freeing of the mind is step number 12. Vimochayang chittang, step number 12. And that is usually where the jhanas come in, because that is the freeing of the mind. So I think this is a more likely way, or more likely to be closer to the intention of the sutta. And so you experience the mind. This nimitta comes up, this disc of light, and then you keep on going. You still haven't given up. The breath may still be there, in the background, or it may not be there. If it's not there, you just focus on the light. But if the breath is there, you kind of focus a bit on both. But the light becoming the most important thing, because it is such a powerful thing. It's very hard not to kind of focus on something which is so powerful. It draws your attention in. Now it becomes very obvious to you how meditation works. Very obvious, because this is so beautiful that you cannot not keep your attention on it. It's like you are compelled to watch this. That draws the mind in. It is so powerful. And then you understand, well, this is how all meditation should work. The object should be as compelling as possible, so your mind, your attention is drawn towards that object. That's the idea. And then, as you do that, And again, throughout this process, you don't really do anything. Yeah, you allow the process to unfold. I mentioned nudging the mind a little bit, and sometimes you can nudge the mind a little bit, but just generally speaking, this is a natural process. It just happens by itself. And so then it says you practice like this, gladdening the mind. Yeah, again, you don't really do anything. The way that you gladden the mind is by staying with that object. And as you stay with it and you allow it to be, and maybe you let go even more. Yeah, this is a gradual letting go process. And as you do that, it becomes brighter, even more happy as a consequence. And then you have samadhayam chittang, which is the last one, immersing the mind in samadhi or stilling the mind. Yeah? So again, you focus on this thing, you keep your attention on it, keep your attention on the center of things, not on the edges, to keep it as still as possible. And the stillness and the bliss keep on growing and growing and growing. And then eventually, this whole process, it leads to the point of freeing the mind, vimochayang chittang. And the freeing of the mind is the entry into a jhana state. This is the samma samadhi, the real samadhi of the path. Entry into a different reality when you give up the five sense world completely and you go into something else. This is what is going on here. So this is like this amazing journey, this extraordinary journey that, that I think we should sell it more. This is what the Buddha taught. This is like, this should be easy to market this stuff, right? The highest happiness in the world. If anything should be easy to market, this should be easy to market, I think. So this is kind of being a monk, we are a little bit in the sales business, marketing business. It's true though, isn't it? That's actually what it is. The Buddha was also a salesman. He's saying, well, I've discovered the meaning of life. Really? Okay, let's hear. So this, of course, we are salespeople to some extent, but we don't push it on people. But if people are interested, then we will tell them. So again, one of the things here is the question of the movement from the feelings to the citta, moving from Vedananupassana to Chittanupassana. And as I mentioned before, every time there is like a transition from one area to another one, it can be a bit tricky sometimes. You feel the bliss, you feel the joy, but where is the nimitta? I want the nimitta. Please don't want the nimitta, that's already going wrong, right? Just enjoy the bliss, and nimitta may arise. The more you want it, the less likely it is to actually arise. But sometimes after the meditation, you may ask yourself, well, I experienced so much happiness and joy here, but I didn't see any light. Why is that? And the answer is very often because you're moving on to the mind. The answer is that you're still holding on a little bit too much to the body and the five senses. Because that is what blocks you, that interest in that world, and especially having the ability to experience the five senses. Not being willing to give them up completely, that is very often the problem at this particular point. And so what you can do then is just to gently remind yourself, like you bring up the perception in the mind, that actually you're not so interested in those senses. They are just too unreliable. There's nothing interesting in that world anyway. It's just more of the same. You travel to India, you get Indian food. And then you go to Singapore, you get Singaporean food. Then you come to Sydney, and you don't get Australian food, you get Honorable Radha and the Deepika's food. And you move around, and this is what people live for, to go to different restaurants, trying different things, but it's basically just variations of the same theme. There's nothing really fundamentally different about these things that give any deeper experience of bliss. Sorry, Deepika, it doesn't have that. And so you remind yourself of the five senses, actually not that interesting. And then you go deeper. Or you contemplate this outside of meditation, probably. That's even better. So you have that contemplation as a foundation. The world of the five senses, okay, you go here, you go there, you see this, you see that. It's not all that exciting after a while. Even though most people in the world live for these kind of things, for traveling, for seeing new things, for hearing new things, after a while you realize, actually, no, I want to go deeper than that. So be careful with buying into what the whole world says. If the whole world says that traveling is good fun, then straight away be skeptical. Usually what the whole world says is usually dodgy. Because the whole world that doesn't know what actually brings about true happiness and joy. Majority usually gets things wrong. If the majority usually got things right, everyone would be enlightened and awakened a long time ago. But that's not the way things are. It's the minority who really reach awakening. And that's why Buddhas are so extremely rare in the world. And so you withdraw your interest from those things and you move them onto the mind, and then these lights, of course, they arise more easily. The other aspect of the light, of course, is that it is even more joyful, even more happy, and so you may also need that extra oomph from the anusatis, the recollections of your conduct and these kind of things. So this is the mind contemplation. And once again, if you compare this to the Satipatthana Sutta, in the Satipatthana Sutta, mind contemplation is defined as knowing also the defilements. It talks about understanding the dosa, raga, and moha. These are the defilements of the mind. And of course here, there's nothing about dosa, raga, and moha. It's all about positive qualities. The positive qualities are also mentioned in the Satipatthana Sutta, because they talk about the Mahagata Chitta, the Anuttara Chitta, and the so it talks about those kind of minds as well, which are the samadhi minds, but they also talk about the negative qualities. And again, you bypass all the negative stuff. You go straight to the happy stuff. And you understand the negative qualities through their absence, not by contemplating their presence. It's a fundamentally flawed idea that you understand raga by watching it. Because when you have these profound defilements, anger, your mind is distorted. You cannot understand them. You can understand it in a very, very vague way only when they are present. It is when they're absent you can understand these things. And so obviously this is a far better way of getting insight into these defilements, is through their absence rather than their presence. And then you understand what is going on there. Yes? Yeah. If it's okay with all of you, I usually take the questions. We usually have a long question session in the evening, so if you don't mind, I'll leave it to then, so we don't kind of break things up too much. So that is the mind contemplation for you. And what is happening here is that this nimitta gets brighter and brighter and brighter until you get to the kind of entry point to jhana, and at that point it's like a flip, and it's like the mind, there's a change, and the mind enters like a different reality. That is kind of the hallmark of the jhana. It's no longer light, it's no longer a focus. Usually, when you're before that, there's like you and there's object. The moment you go into samadhi, there is no duality anymore. You and object is one thing. That's why it's called ekaggata and ekodibutta. One pointed means like everything comes together in one thing. Especially the word ekodibutta means become one. And that's why these states are called non-dual states. They're called ekatta in the sutras. It means oneness. There's no sense of duality anymore. You cannot say, I am this is what I'm watching. It's one thing. Everything is one thing. And that's why people say this must surely be God. Now I have merged with God. Everything has become one. This is God. I declare this is God because I have seen it with my own eyes. Except that God ceases after a while. That's kind of unfortunate. So when God ceases, then you think, okay, maybe it wasn't God after all. That's what happens. And so that is the path for you into samadhi. These first 12 steps of the Anapanasati Sutta are usually called the samatha part of the sutta. But of course, samatha and vipassana always go together. There's no such thing as one without the other. And so I would say all of this is samatha and vipassana. But the last 4 are more focused on understanding the things that we normally think about as vipassana, impermanence, etc. And with impermanence also comes understanding the dukkha and the non-self as well. So let's now move on to the last 4. And this then is equivalent to the Dhammanupassana of the Satipatthana Sutta. And the Dhammanupassana is a very interesting collection of various focuses for the meditation practice. And again, what I very often use, I go to what Bhante Sujato has researched with his research on the Satipatthana Sutta. And he says in his remarkable book, The History of Mindfulness, I don't know if any one of you have read it. It's a bit of a hard going unless you're really, really, really into the suttas. You have to really enjoy it. But I have certainly read it. And I think it is very, very interesting, and he makes some very good points. And one of the points that he makes about the Dhammanupassana is that of all of these various ways of contemplating the 5 hindrances, the 6 sense bases, the 7 factors of awakening, the 4 noble truths, and the 5 aggregates, or actually the 5 aggregates first and the 4 noble truths. These are the 5 contemplations. And he says, actually, of these 5, there's only 2 that are likely to be original, the original Satipatthana Sutta as laid down by the Buddha, and the rest has been added at some point in history. And those 2 original ones are the contemplation of the 5 hindrances and the 7 factors of awakening. And that is very, very interesting, because it fits with the idea what we're going to see now. Because the way that the 7 factors of awakening and the 5 hindrances are explained in the Satipatthana Sutta is that you should know the hindrance, you should know how it arises, how it comes to an end, and how it does not re-arise again in the future. The 4 ways of knowing these 5 hindrances. And then a similar thing for the factors of awakening here. And so it is all about causality here. It is all about understanding how things come to be and how they cease. It is related to the idea of impermanence, right? Things arise because of conditions, and they then disappear when those conditions disappear. And because the last 4 here of the Anapanasati Sutta is all about impermanence, now you can see how it fits together with the Dhammanupassana of the Satipatthana Sutta. They actually fit together very well once you kind of clear some of the fog from the what is going on there. So I hope I'm making some sense. If not, you're most welcome to ask again this evening here. So this then is the last 4 steps, and they are said to be as follows in the Anapanasati Suttas. You practice like this. I will breathe in, observing impermanence. You practice like this. I will breathe out, observing impermanence. You practice like this. I will breathe in, observing fading away. You practice like this. I will breathe out, observing fading away. You practice like this. I will breathe in, observing ending or cessation. You practice like this. I will breathe out, observing cessation. You practice like this. I will breathe out, observing letting go. You practice like this, I will breathe out, observing letting go. So, what is the connection between these 4 things? They may not seem like they are connected, but they are very closely connected. These are different degrees of impermanence that you see here. The initial one is just anicca. Anicca initially is just kind of things always moving, not being stable. Even when they are in existence, they are moving, like the waves on the ocean or something like that. So this is like the initial impermanence. It's like the breath, and it is there, and then it becomes shorter or longer or whatever. This is kind of the impermanence of the breath. It is not stable in any way. So that is the initial one, very simple kind of impermanence, and the least interesting part of the impermanence. But then comes the idea of fading away, viraga. Viraga means 2 things in the Pali language. It either is the opposite of raga. Raga is basically desire, so it's like non-desire. That's one meaning of the word, but the other one is a fading away. And so fading away means that it's not just that things are impermanent, but they are impermanent in a certain direction. When something fades away, it is like it's not just going up and down, it is like in a direction going down, right? Less and less and less. That is what fading away means. And so this is impermanence, this is fading away here. You know what I mean? So it has impermanence with a certain direction to it. Gradually things becoming less. And of course, if you take that gradually becoming less to its logical conclusion, that is cessation, that is nirodha, which is the next one. So you have degrees of impermanence, and the most powerful impermanence that you can have is nirodha, because then you really understand that something is absolutely impermanent. When it's completely gone, then, of course, then you know you can't hold on to it, it can't have anything to do with you, it's going to be dukkha and all of these kind of things. And then the last one is letting go. This is patinissagga, and that is when you observe the impermanence of something, especially its cessation, then eventually the insight arises that this is not worth holding on to. And when you understand it's not worth holding on to, you let it go. You don't crave for it anymore. You don't desire it anymore. Yeah? And this is the last one of these ones, the ending, complete ending of things, the letting go, the end of craving. And that, of course, is the end of the path itself. And so there's a sequence here of understanding various kinds of impermanence. So that's the first thing. But what exactly are we understanding in this way? What are we understanding as impermanent? What are we focusing on? And what we are focusing on is that process of meditation that we have just been through. So you've been through a process of meditation. It has gone maybe so far, and depending on how far, how deeply that meditation go, you can then use these last 4 to contemplate that process. And so if your breath is becoming more and more subtle, it means that you come to understand what the fading away of the breath actually is. The breath more and more subtle, more and more subtle, more and more gone, and eventually completely gone. That's the nirodha of the breath. And of course that happens really only fully when you enter a jhana state, when the breath is completely inaccessible. You can't turn your mind to it anymore, because you can't turn your mind to anything at that point. Your mind is kind of in that jhana state. And then you can do that with everything that is happening in the process of meditation. All the 5 khandhas can be contemplated in this way. So the breath is part of the rupa khandha. So you can see the rupa khandha fading away. The rest of the body is already kind of largely gone. The breath is often the last part of the body that remains. Or maybe a bit of hearing is also part of this. And you do this, you see the body fading away. And you see it fading away until it's completely gone. And when the body is completely gone, you can't access it anymore because you enter the jhana state. And that means, first of all, you know the Buddha body is impermanent. You also know it is dukkha, because when it's gone, wow, what happiness! Get rid of this body, please. There's so much dukkha. And last thing, it is non-self, because you cannot access it anymore. One of the Buddha's most interesting things that he says about the idea of non-self is that if it is a self, you can control it. But if you can't even access it, well, you certainly can't control it. And so it is completely outside of your orbit of influence. It must be non-self. And so you see all the 3 characteristics relating to the first of the 5 khandhas, the rupa khandha. So this is how you understand the 5 khandhas through experience in terms of the 3 characteristics, the tilakkhana. Then you do the same with the other khandhas, like perception. So you see your perception is changing. You are still perceiving all kind of things, the senses, the body, etc. And then your perceptions are more attuned to feelings. Your perceptions are changing and changing and changing. And certain perceptions are ceasing. Certain perceptions are coming to an end. The perceptions of the body is coming to an end. The perceptions of painful feelings is coming to an end. The perception of the will is gradually declining. The will is becoming less and less. And so you do the same thing with the idea of perception. They are impermanent. They are gradually becoming eliminated. So they are viraga. They are disappearing gradually. And then eventually they cease. They come to an end. And a whole world of perception comes to an end in the first jhana. The whole world of sensuality is gone. There are no more 5 senses. Vivicheva kamehi means separated. Eva means completely. from the five senses. Kama in the plural as a word refers to the five senses. In the singular, it refers to desire in a general sense. In the plural, it refers to the five senses. So you are separated from the five senses. Vivicheva kamehi, vivicha kusalehi damehi is that first sentence in the formula for the first jhana. And then you can do the same. I forgot about feelings. I went straight to perception. But you do the same thing with the feelings. Yeah, feelings changing, the painful feelings disappearing, fading away, then disappearing. The happy feelings changing, becoming more and more subtle. Certain happy feelings disappearing. Yeah, and again, you can see the same process with the feelings. Very important one is sankhara, because sankhara is the will of the mind. Yeah, you come to the word sankhara is a very interesting word because it has different meanings in different contexts. But in the context of the five khandhas and in the context of dependent origination, paticca samuppada, it always means the will. Yeah, so it is the doing aspect of the mind. It's the agent inside. I am the doer. I am the creator, the creative activity inside. And that will is gradually becoming still. That's why the mind becomes peaceful, because the will is disappearing. The presence of the will is inversely proportional to the presence of peace. I'm just repeating what I learned at school, inversely proportional. It sounds very kind of fancy to put it that way, so just pretending to be authoritative, I suppose. So this is a very important point. Because the will is such an important part of who we take ourselves to be. We are the doers in the world. We are the agents. We are the creative people. We are the artists. Yeah? Artists are put on pedestals in our world because they are beautiful creators of beautiful things. And there's something to be said for that. Except that in Buddhism, we go beyond that. We go even deeper. And so that creative activity itself is seen as dukkha. So when the go enter the first jhana, all the willing is gone. There's still a subtle movement of the mind, but it's not really willing in any ordinary sense of the word. And when all willing is gone, wow, it is so blissful. And you understand that sense of self that you had as the doer, that you thought defined you as a person and made your life meaningful because you could create so many beautiful things in the world, that whole sense of self, which is elevated on a pedestal in our world, is a problem. It should be rejected. Yeah, it is not nice. And that is an extraordinary thing because it's so counter to how the world understands these things. It's a completely different direction. And then what the Buddha means, that what the world says is dukkha, or the world says is sukha, the Aryas say is dukkha, and what the world says is sukha, the Aryas say is dukkha. It's a complete inverse of how the world looks at things, the way we see things through proper Dhamma eyes. And so notice these things in your meditation. Notice how nice it is to let go of the will. And everyone here will know that to some extent. But you only know it fully when you step out of the water. And stepping out of the water happens when you enter the jhana states. That is one reason why these jhanas are so incredibly important, because they allow you a completely new way of thinking about the world. Suddenly you're outside of the pond. Suddenly you have this ability to see the world in an entirely new way. Now I understand what is going on. Out of sensuality, out of the will. Yeah? We underestimate the amount of insight that comes with these jhana experiences. In the suttas, the jhanas, one of the names for the jhanas is Allang Arya Nanadasana Visesa, which means a distinction in knowledge and vision worthy of the noble ones. Knowledge and vision is a distinction in knowledge and vision. Yeah, usually everyone says, oh, it's just samadhi, just samadhi. No, the Buddha says it's a distinction in knowledge, not just knowledge and vision, but a distinction in knowledge and vision worthy of the noble ones. So there's a large amount of understanding, of insight, vipassana, if you like, that comes with these jhana states. This is why they are so incredibly important. And so you use your that previous experience you had, however far you have gone through those 12 steps, and you contemplate them based on these 4 ideas: anicca, viraga, nirodha, patinissagga. these other four. And even if you just go a little bit, and this is why I always say at the end of your meditation, look back, understand what happened, because this is exactly what it says in this sutta here. This is exactly the same kind of advice. Try to understand what happened. What is gone? Am I more happy? What is dukkha? What was impermanent? How did I get there? What does letting go mean? Etc., etc. And then you start to understand this whole process. Okay, so let me do the last sentence, because dear Rupa reminded me it's good to do the last sentence, so we will do that. So that's the Buddha then summarize everything by saying mindfulness of breathing, when developed and cultivated in this way, is very fruitful and beneficial. And of course, it's because it eventually takes you all the way to becoming an arahant. So that is all for now. So please keep on enjoying yourself, have a good time, and yeah. And now, sadhu. Very good. Now there is some interviews and things there. Over there. Okay, great.